The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Hegemony Council gleamed under 3 different suns. Inside, representatives from 47 species sat in circular rows, their various forms casting strange shadows on the polished floor. Today's meeting would change everything, though none of them knew it yet. Ambassador Veltar of the Chinthari Empire stood at the center podium. His forearms moved in precise gestures as holographic displays filled the air around him. Images of a small blue planet appeared, rotating slowly. Earth, they called it. The 3rd planet from a yellow star called Sol. Council members, Veltar began, his voice echoing through translation devices. We have a problem. 3 months ago we made contact with a new species. Humans, they call themselves. What we learned should terrify every civilized being in this galaxy. The first hologram showed human soldiers marching in formation. They looked ordinary enough. Bipedal, no natural weapons. Relatively small compared to most warrior species. But Veltar had more to show. These beings have been at war for their entire existence, he continued. Not just occasional conflicts like most primitive species. Constant total warfare. They have been fighting each other for over 10,000 years without stopping. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Councillor Theclon of the Bovine Alliance leaned forward. Surely you exaggerate, Ambassador. How species could survive such a thing? Veltar's second set of arms activated new displays. Battle scenes from human history filled the air. Ancient warriors with metal swords, soldiers with primitive firearms, massive machines of war rolling across devastated landscapes. They not only survived, Veltar said, they turned their entire planet into a military academy. Every human nation maintains standing armies. Every human settlement has defensive positions. Every human child learns about warfare from birth. The images changed to show human cities. From above, they looked normal enough. But Veltar highlighted the details. The underground bunkers, the hidden weapon positions. The roads designed for rapid military movement. Their most recent global conflict lasted only 6 years, Veltar continued. They consider this short and relatively peaceful. In those 6 years, 75 million humans died. They call it their Second World War, implying they had an even larger one before. The chamber fell silent. Most species had never experienced casualties on such a scale in their entire recorded history. At the edge of the chamber, 2 humans observed quietly. Ambassador Kang Deho sat perfectly still, his face showing no emotion. Beside him, Captain Lee Minhyuk took careful notes, though he seemed more interested in studying the alien representatives than listening to the presentation. Veltar activated new recordings. 3 weeks ago, we requested their assistance with a minor dispute on the frontier world of Kepler, 442b. 2 local species were fighting over mining rights. We expected them to send negotiators. The hologram showed a human transport ship landing. 50 soldiers emerged, wearing simple uniforms and carrying basic weapons. They looked unremarkable compared to the heavily armored alien warriors already on the planet. What happened next should serve as a warning to us all, Veltar said. The recording played. The human soldiers moved through the conflict zone with purpose. They did not march in the rigid formations favored by most military species. Instead, they flowed like water, each soldier knowing exactly where the others would be without seeming to communicate. When the first shots were fired, the difference became clear. The human soldiers did not take cover behind their defensive positions. They used the terrain itself, finding protection in places other species had not even noticed. Their return fire was precise and coordinated, but more disturbing was their behavior under stress. The aliens watched in horror as human soldiers continued fighting with injuries that would incapacitate most species. One soldier advanced on an enemy position with a broken arm, using his rifle one-handed with the same accuracy as before. Another kept providing covering fire even after taking multiple wounds that should have sent him into shock. This is what they call normal human behavior, Veltar emphasized. These were not their elite forces. These were standard peacekeeping troops. The recording showed the battle's end. The human commander, a calm woman with graying hair, walked between the alien factions who had been fighting. She spoke quietly to each group. Within hours, both sides had agreed to a peaceful resolution. They ended a conflict that had been raging for months, Veltar said. Not through superior firepower, though they clearly possessed it. They simply made both sides realize that continued fighting was pointless. Counselor Thekalon shifted uncomfortably. What are you proposing, Ambassador? Veltar's forearms spread wide. I propose we act now, before they expand beyond their home system. We have seen what their regular soldiers can do. Imagine what their actual military forces are capable of. Other council members began to speak at once. Some agreed with Veltar's assessment. Others argued for more diplomatic contact. A few suggested offering the humans membership in the hegemony, thinking they could be controlled. Through it all, Kang Daiho remained silent. When finally called upon to speak, he stood slowly and walked to the podium. Council members, he said in simple, clear words, my species appreciates your concern. We hope to build peaceful relationships with all civilized races. But you must understand, Kang Daiho continued, what Ambassador Veltar has shown you represents only a small portion of human capability. The soldiers in those recordings were indeed our regular forces. We have others who are differently trained, Veltar interrupted. Are you threatening this council? Kang Daiho's expression never changed. Not at all. I am simply providing information as you have done. You have shown footage of human peacekeepers. Perhaps you would like to know about our other military branches. The chamber grew quiet. Lee Min-hyuk looked up from his notes and spoke for the first time. If I may ask, Ambassador Veltar, what types of special military units do hegemony forces maintain? The question seemed innocent enough. Veltar began describing elite units from various member species. Shock troops, infiltration specialists, deep space reconnaissance forces. Lee Min-hyuk listened carefully, asking detailed questions about training methods, equipment, and operational procedures. Later, historians would mark this moment as the beginning of the end for the old galactic order. Lee Min-hyuk's innocent questions were creating a detailed intelligence profile of hegemony military capabilities. The council session ended with a vote. Despite Kang Daiho's subtle warnings, they authorized what Veltar called a surgical strike against Earth's military infrastructure. The goal was to disable human forces before they could spread beyond their home system. As the representatives filed out, Kang Daiho caught Veltar's attention. Ambassador, he said quietly, I hope you will reconsider this course of action. Veltar's primary arms crossed over his chest in a gesture of dismissal. Humans may be fierce fighters, but you are still a primitive species with primitive technology. This council commands the military might of 47 worlds. Kang Daiho nodded slowly. As you wish. We will await your decision. As the humans left the chamber, Lee Min-hyuk transmitted a coded message to Earth. It was brief and simple. Reserve protocols recommended. Special operations standing by. On Earth, deep beneath the Pentagon, a secure communication reached General Song Min-jae. He read the message twice, then walked to a wall display showing unit deployments across the planet. Most showed green status, active and ready. But several units showed yellow, training status. With a few keystrokes, those units changed to red. The galaxy was about to discover what humans meant by special forces. The Hegemony war fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, like a swarm of angry metal insects. 500 ships of various designs spread across space in perfect formation. Admiral Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. Communications, he ordered. Begin broadcasting surrender terms to the planet Earth. The message was simple. Humanity had 24 hours to surrender all military forces and submit to hegemony oversight. Failure to comply would result in the complete destruction of their military infrastructure. On Earth, General Park Hyon received the ultimatum in his underground command center. Around him, dozens of officers worked at control stations coordinating the planet's defenses. The general was a small man with graying hair, but his eyes held the calm confidence of someone who had seen many battles. Sir, reported Major Kim Soo-jin from her position at the defense grid controls. Enemy fleet is maintaining position at maximum engagement range. They appear to be waiting for our response. Park Hyon studied the tactical display. 500 ships against Earth's orbital defenses and atmospheric fighters. By any normal calculation, the odds were hopeless. But Park Hyon was not thinking about normal calculations. Open a channel to the Hegemony flagship, he ordered. Veltar's image appeared on the main screen. The alien's forearms were crossed in what humans had learned was a gesture of authority among his species. General Park, Veltar said, I trust you have considered our terms. I have, Park Hyon replied calmly. I am authorized to offer you one opportunity to withdraw your forces from this system peacefully. Veltar's expression showed what might have been amusement. You offer us terms? General, you are facing the combined military might of 47 worlds. Your primitive weapons cannot possibly— Admiral, Park Hyon interrupted. You have 1 hour to begin your withdrawal. After that time, any hostile forces remaining in this system will be destroyed. The transmission ended. Around the command center, human officers continued their work without comment. They had heard such threats before. Veltar stared at the blank screen in disbelief. Primitive arrogance, he muttered. All ships advance to attack positions. Begin orbital bombardment of military targets. The hegemony fleet moved forward, energy weapons charging. Their shields were rated to stop any known projectile weapon, and their armor could withstand direct nuclear strikes. Against a planet with no apparent space fleet, this should have been a simple demonstration of superior technology. Lieutenant Colonel Yu Jiho sat in the cockpit of his fighter, waiting in the launch bay of an orbital platform. Around him, 99 other pilots performed final system checks. Their ships looked primitive compared to hegemony fighters. No energy weapons, no advanced shields, just reinforced metal hulls and chemical rockets. All squadrons, came the voice from control. Launch when ready. The fighter bays opened and human pilots rocketed into space. The hegemony fleet detected them immediately, but the readings confused their sensors. The human ships were moving far too fast for their apparent technology level. What the aliens did not understand was that human fighters were built for pilots who could withstand forces that would kill most other species. The cockpits were smaller, the life support systems simpler, but the engines were proportionally much more powerful. Yu Jiho's squadron dove toward the nearest hegemony cruiser at full acceleration. His body pressed back into his seat as G-forces mounted, but he had trained for this his entire adult life. Around him, his squadron maintained perfect formation, even as they pulled maneuvers that should have been impossible. The hegemony cruiser opened fire with energy weapons. Bright beams lanced through space designed to vaporize enemy ships on contact. But the human fighters were no longer where the targeting computers expected them to be. Human pilots had learned to fight in 3 dimensions while most alien species still thought in terms of naval warfare. They rolled and twisted through space like aerial dogfighters, using their superior acceleration to stay ahead of targeting systems designed for more predictable opponents. Yu Jiho's fighter reached attack range and fired. Not energy weapons, but simple solid projectiles. Metal slugs accelerated to incredible velocities by chemical explosives. The technology was thousands of years old by galactic standards. The projectiles struck the hegemony cruiser's shields and passed right through them. The shields were designed to stop energy weapons and slow-moving missiles, not small, fast-moving pieces of metal. The ancient human technology was so primitive that advanced defenses simply ignored it. Holes appeared in the cruiser's hull as kinetic projectiles tore through armor designed to stop energy beams. Warning lights flashed across Veltar's flagship as reports came in from other ships. The primitive human weapons were devastating the fleet. How is this possible? Demanded the Admiral's tactical officer. Major Kim Sujin watched the battle from Earth's Defense Control Center. The orbital platforms were now fully active, launching wave after wave of projectiles at the hegemony fleet. Like the fighters, the platforms used simple kinetic weapons, metal slugs and chemical explosives. Enemy flagship is attempting to withdraw, reported one of her technicians. Negative, Kim Sujin replied. Continue firing. Target their engines first. The hegemony had made a critical error in their intelligence gathering. They had observed human peacekeeping forces and assumed those represented the peak of human military capability. They had not considered that a species shaped by constant warfare might have developed multiple types of combat doctrine. The peacekeepers they had observed were trained for occupation and stability operations. The forces defending Earth were trained for total war. Commander Wang Bowman led a squadron of what the humans called space submarines. The ships looked like elongated cylinders with minimal external features. They had been designed for stealth operations in Earth's oceans, then adapted for the vacuum of space. Wang Bowman's submarine approached a hegemony dreadnought from below, using the planet's magnetic field to mask its approach. The enemy ship's sensors were focused on the obvious threats, the fighters and orbital platforms. They were not looking for silent hunters moving through space like predators. The submarine attached to the dreadnought's hull using magnetic clamps. Wang Baomen's crew worked quickly, cutting through the enemy's armor with tools designed for underwater salvage operations. Within minutes, they had breached the hull and were inside the ship. Hegemony crew members found themselves facing human soldiers in the corridors of their own ship. The aliens were larger and stronger, but the humans moved through the ship like they had built it themselves. They seemed to know exactly where to strike to disable critical systems. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human forces were not just fighting the Hegemony fleet. They were systematically capturing ships intact. Boarding parties swarmed over enemy vessels, their troops moving through zero gravity with the ease of a species that had spent centuries fighting in every possible environment. Veltar watched his tactical display with growing horror. His fleet was not being destroyed, it was being dismantled. Human forces seemed to anticipate every move his ships made. When he ordered a retreat, human fighters were already in position to block escape routes. When he tried to regroup, human submarines appeared from nowhere to attack his formation's weak points. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving another transmission from the planet's surface." General Park Hyan appeared on the screen again. Behind him, the command center operated with calm efficiency. No celebration, no excitement, just professional military personnel doing their jobs. "Admiral Veltar," Park Hyan said, "I am prepared to accept the surrender of your remaining forces. You will be treated according to the laws of war and repatriated after this conflict is resolved." "Surrender?" Veltar sputtered. "We still have over 300 operational ships." Park Hyan's expression did not change. "You had 500 ships when you entered this system. In the past 4 hours, you have lost 40% of your fleet and gained no tactical advantage. Your remaining ships are currently surrounded and cut off from retreat routes." The general paused, consulting a datapad. "Additionally, Admiral, I should inform you that what you have encountered today represents only Earth's defensive forces. Our offensive capabilities remain untested." Veltar stared at the human general. "Offensive capabilities? Standard Earth military doctrine maintains separate forces for different operational requirements," Park Hyan explained patiently. "You have been engaged by our planetary defense forces and local space superiority fighters. These units are designed to protect Earth and its immediate orbital space." The general's voice remained calm and professional. "Our expeditionary forces are currently being prepared for deployment. These units are trained and equipped for operations in hostile territory, far from Earth support." On his tactical display, Veltar watched as more human contacts appeared. Ships were emerging from hidden positions throughout the system, not the fighters and platforms he had been fighting, but larger vessels that had somehow remained undetected. "However," Park Hyan continued, "before we proceed to the next phase of operations, I am required to inform you that Earth Command has authorized the activation of Special Operations Protocols. Velt, 3 weeks after the failed invasion of Earth, strange things began happening across Hegemony space. It started small. A communication relay on the edge of Chintari territory went silent. A supply depot in the bovine sector reported unusual readings, then stopped responding entirely. Minor incidents that could have been equipment failures or accidents, but Admiral Veltar, now held prisoner aboard his own flagship under human guard, knew better. He had seen the look in General Park Hyan's eyes when the human mentioned special operations. Something was coming, and it would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. The first major incident occurred at the Tectron Military Academy on Hegemony Prime. The academy trained the galaxy's finest warriors, combining the best techniques from dozens of species into a curriculum that produced soldiers capable of serving anywhere in Hegemony. Space. Commandant Zrelkath was reviewing the next day's training schedule when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, bathing the facility in red light, but by then it was too late. Security teams rushed to the main armory to find the massive reinforced doors standing open. Inside, weapon racks that had held enough equipment to arm a battalion were empty. Surveillance recordings showed nothing. The cameras had somehow been disabled during the exact moments when the theft occurred. But spray-painted on the armory wall, in precise black letters, was a message in several human languages. "You should have listened to your ambassador." Staff Sergeant Choi Yuna and her team were already 3 star systems away when the theft was discovered. The weapons they had taken were not for their own use. Human equipment was generally superior to hegemony standard issue. Instead, they would be distributed to resistance movements on worlds that had been forced into the hegemony alliance. Human intelligence had identified 17 different species that maintained their membership in the hegemony only under threat of military action. These species would make excellent allies, but first they needed to believe that resistance was possible. The explosion that destroyed the hegemony's primary shipyard at Nexus 7 provided that proof. The facility had been considered absolutely secure, protected by energy shields, orbital defense platforms, and a garrison of elite troops. The explosion was visible from 3 different planets and left a debris field that would be a navigation hazard for the next century. No one saw the human infiltrators approach. No sensors detected their ships. Security cameras recorded nothing unusual. One moment the shipyard was operating normally, the next it was expanding plasma cloud. Master Sergeant Lim Dong-hyun led the team responsible for that operation. His specialty was underwater demolitions, adapted for space operations. The techniques were surprisingly similar. Approach unseen, plant charges, withdraw without detection. The difference was that in space there was no water to muffle sound or hide movement. Instead, Lim Dong-hyun's team used the galaxy's own assumptions against it. Hegemony sensors were designed to detect ships, not individual soldiers in specialized suits that mimicked the thermal and electromagnetic signatures of space debris. His team had approached the shipyard over a period of 6 days, moving slowly enough to avoid triggering motion sensors. They placed their charges not on the most obvious targets, but on structural points that would cause maximum damage when the explosions propagated through the facility's framework. The psychological impact was even more important than the physical destruction. The hegemony had always projected an image of invincible strength. Losing their most secure facility to an enemy they could not see or detect shattered that image. Captain Onara's mission was different, but equally important. Her target was not a facility or a piece of equipment, but people, specifically, human prisoners who had been captured during the initial invasion attempt. The hegemony had taken them to a maximum security facility on the planet Kethlos, where they were being interrogated for information about Earth's defenses. The facility was built into the planet's crust, 3 kilometers underground with only one access tunnel. Onara's team used an approach that no hegemony planner had considered. Instead of trying to infiltrate through the tunnel, they created their own entrance. Using mining equipment stolen from an industrial planet 2 systems away, they bored down from the surface at a point precisely calculated to intersect the prisoner holding area. The operation took 12 days of continuous drilling, with her team working in shifts to maintain the equipment and avoid detection. When they broke through into the facility, the surprised guards found themselves facing humans who seemed to have materialized from solid rock. The rescue took less than 20 minutes. Onara's team extracted all 14 human prisoners and was gone before facility security could organize an effective response. They left behind another message, this one in the universal trade language, taking our people home. But the most disturbing incidents involved Sergeant First, Class Bei Jinho. His specialty was psychological operations, warfare that targeted the enemy's mind rather than their equipment. Bei Jinho did not destroy facilities or rescue prisoners. Instead, he did something far more dangerous to the hegemony's stability. He began spreading information. The first broadcasts appeared on hegemony communication networks without warning. Documentary footage showing the true history of how various species had been forced to join the alliance. Records of economic exploitation that had been hidden from member worlds. Evidence of military actions taken against civilian populations. The broadcasts were impossible to trace or stop. They appeared simultaneously on dozens of networks across multiple star systems, overwhelming the hegemony's ability to censor them. Worse, they were accurate. Bei Jinho had been very careful to verify every piece of information before release. On the industrial world of Kepler 440c, workers who had never questioned their loyalty to the hegemony began asking uncomfortable questions about where their resources were really going. On the agricultural planet New Harvest, farmers learned that their crops were feeding hegemony military forces while their own children went hungry. The psychological impact spread faster than any physical attack could have traveled. Member species began to doubt, then to question, then to openly resist hegemony authority. Admiral Veltar watched these reports from his quarters aboard the human-controlled flagship. His captors had been scrupulously correct in their treatment. He was fed regularly, given medical attention, and allowed to communicate with his subordinates. But they made sure he saw every report of human operations across hegemony space. "It is impossible," he told his human guard during one of their conversations. "Your forces cannot be everywhere at once. You do not have enough ships or soldiers to conduct operations across 50 different star systems simultaneously." The guard, a young lieutenant whose name was Park Jinwoo, considered the question seriously before answering. "Admiral, I think you are still thinking about this the wrong way. Explain." "You are counting ships and soldiers like this is a traditional war," Park Jinwoo said. "But our special operations forces do not fight traditional wars. They fight smart wars." The lieutenant gestured toward the reports on Veltar's desk. "Sergeant Choi Yuna's team has 12 soldiers. But by arming resistance movements, those 12 soldiers have multiplied their effectiveness by a factor of hundreds. Master Sergeant Lim Dongyan destroyed a shipyard with 8 people and some stolen mining equipment." Park Jinwoo paused, choosing his words carefully. "Captain Onara rescued 14 prisoners, but the real victory was proving to your member species that hegemony security is not absolute. Sergeant Bei Genho has not fired a single shot, but his information warfare has caused more damage to hegemony unity than a fleet of battleships could have achieved." Veltar stared at the human officer. "This is how your species fights? By turning enemies against each other?" "When necessary," Park Jinwoo replied. "But preferably we convince enemies to stop being enemies. It is more efficient and causes less suffering." Over the following weeks, the pattern continued. Hegemony facilities disappeared overnight. Supply lines were disrupted by precisely placed explosions. Key personnel vanished from supposedly secure locations. Communication networks carried broadcasts that undermined hegemony authority and exposed decades of hidden policies. But the most unsettling aspect was that no one ever saw the humans responsible. Security recordings showed nothing. Witnesses reported no unusual activity. The humans seemed to move through hegemony space like ghosts, striking without warning and vanishing without trace. The Hegemony Council met in emergency session to address the crisis. 47 species representatives gathered in their crystal dome. But the mood was very different from their confident gathering months earlier. "Our intelligence services report human activity in 37 different star systems," announced Councillor Thecklon. Simultaneously, "This should be impossible with the forces Earth possesses. Unless," suggested another representative, "we have seriously underestimated those forces." The debate continued for hours. Some council members argued for increased security measures. Others proposed negotiating why. Fortress Kethmar was the crown jewel of hegemony military engineering. Built in the empty space between star systems, it served as the central command hub for all hegemony military operations. The station was massive, large enough to house 50,000 personnel, and defended by technology from every member species in the Alliance automated defense platforms, surrounded the station in a sphere 300 kilometers in diameter. Energy shields powerful enough to stop asteroid impacts protected the hull. The facility maintained its own fleet of patrol ships and was staffed entirely by the galaxy's most elite warriors. Admiral Krelthon, the station's commanding officer, had personally selected every member of the garrison. They represented the best soldiers from 47 different worlds, trained in techniques that had been perfected over thousands of years. If Earth's special forces wanted to test themselves against the galaxy's finest, Fortress Kethmar was where they would come. Krelthon was not disappointed. The humans arrived exactly as he had predicted they would. What he had not predicted was how they would arrive. The first indication of trouble came from the outer sensor array. Technician Yelmos was monitoring long-range scans when his equipment detected an anomaly. A small object moving through space on a trajectory that would bring it close to the station. "Sir," Yelmos reported to his supervisor, "I have an unidentified contact approaching from Sector 7. The supervisor, a veteran of dozens of space battles, reviewed the data. The object was small, moving slowly, and showed no energy signatures consistent with weapons or propulsion systems. Probably space debris, he concluded. Log it and continue monitoring. What the sensors did not detect was that the debris contained 4 humans in specialized suits that had been designed to mimic the electromagnetic and thermal characteristics of ordinary space junk. Colonel Ryu Jaewon and his team had been drifting toward the station for 6 days, using minimal life support and making no movements that might trigger motion sensors. The approach was based on a technique human special forces had developed for underwater operations: patience, preparation, and absolute discipline. In the ocean, divers could remain motionless for hours to avoid detection. In space, with proper equipment and training, the same principles applied. When the debris reached the outer defense perimeter, it passed through the energy barriers without triggering any alarms. The shields were designed to stop fast-moving objects like missiles or fighter craft, not slow-moving junk drifting through space. Colonel Ryu Jaewon's team attached to the hull of a patrol ship during a routine inspection flight. The ship's crew never knew they had passengers as it passed through multiple security checkpoints and docked with the main station. Once inside Fortress Kethmar, the humans began their real work. Master Chief Petty Officer Han Soman was the first to move. While her teammates remained hidden in the patrol ship's cargo bay, she made her way through the station's maintenance tunnels. Her target was the central computer core that controlled all station operations. Han So-min had studied hegemony computer systems for months, learning their programming languages and security protocols. But the real key to her success was understanding how the aliens thought. Hegemony computer security was designed to stop direct attacks and prevent unauthorized access from outside the system. It was not designed to stop someone who was already inside and who understood the system's logical structure. She did not try to break through security barriers. Instead, she created legitimate user accounts for herself and her team, complete with authorization codes and personnel records. The computer system accepted her credentials because, as far as it could determine, she was exactly who she claimed to be. Within 2 hours, Han So-min had administrative access to every system on the station. She could control life support, internal communications, security cameras, and even the defensive weapons, but she did not immediately use these capabilities. Instead, she began gathering intelligence about hegemony military operations across the galaxy. Gunnery Sergeant Park Woo-sung had a different mission. His job was to neutralize the station's elite garrison without causing unnecessary casualties. It was a delicate assignment that required precise timing and an intimate understanding of alien psychology. Park Woo-sung moved through the station like a ghost, using maintenance shafts and service corridors to avoid detection. When he encountered guards, he did not fight them. Instead, he used techniques human special forces had developed from studying dozens of different species. Each alien race had evolved different vulnerabilities: pressure points that would render them unconscious, nerve clusters that could be manipulated to cause temporary paralysis, psychological triggers that would create confusion or fear. Park Woo-sung had memorized the anatomy and psychology of every species represented in the garrison. The guards who encountered him were found hours later, unharmed, but with no memory of what had happened. Some reported strange dreams about shadows that moved independently of their owners. Others claimed they had heard voices speaking in languages that did not exist. Technical Sergeant Lee Minji provided reconnaissance and coordination for the operation. Her equipment was more advanced than anything the hegemony possessed: sensors that could track individuals through solid walls, communication devices that were undetectable by alien technology, recording equipment that captured intelligence data in formats the enemy could not decode. Lee Minji mapped every section of the station, identified key personnel and their routines, and maintained real-time communication with human forces throughout the galaxy. She was the invisible network that allowed Colonel Ryu Jaewon's team to coordinate their actions with operations on dozens of other worlds. The humans worked for 72 hours before Admiral Krelthon realized they were aboard his station. The discovery came when he tried to access classified files about hegemony strategic planning and found that his authorization codes had been changed. "Impossible," he muttered, trying the codes again. The computer politely informed him that access was denied. Krelthon summoned his chief of security, a massive warrior from the Krelnathi Empire, whose species had evolved for combat in high-gravity environments. "Chief, I want a complete security sweep of this facility. Someone has compromised our computer systems." The security chief organized search teams throughout the station. They found nothing. The humans had become part of the station's background, invisible to searches designed to find infiltrators who did not understand the facility's layout or daily routines. But Colonel Ryu Jae-won decided it was time to make their presence known. Admiral Krelthon was in his office, reviewing security reports when the lights dimmed and his communication system activated on its own. A human face appeared on his screen, calm, professional, with the quiet confidence of someone who was completely in control of the situation. Admiral Krelthon, Colonel Ryu Jae-won said, "I am Colonel Ryu Jae-won of Earth Special Operations Command. I believe we need to have a conversation." Krelthon reached for his emergency alarm, but nothing happened when he pressed it. The colonel continued speaking as if he had expected the response. "My team has been aboard your station for the past 3 days," Ryu Jae-won explained. "We have complete control of your computer systems, your defensive weapons, and your communications. Your garrison has been neutralized through non-lethal means. No one has been seriously injured." The admiral stared at the screen in disbelief. "What do you want?" "Information," the colonel replied simply. "And a demonstration." "Demonstration?" Colonel Ryu Jae-won's expression never changed. "You represent the military leadership of 47 worlds. Your species have convinced themselves that humanity is a primitive threat that can be contained through superior technology and overwhelming force. This belief is incorrect and dangerous." The screen split to show multiple views throughout the station. In the control center, hegemony technicians sat at their stations unaware that every system they operated was under human control. In the barracks, elite soldiers continued their routines, not knowing that they had been monitored and assessed for days. "My team consists of 4 people," Colonel Ryu Jae-won continued. "We have neutralized the most secure military facility in hegemony space, using equipment that your species would consider primitive. We have done this without killing anyone or causing permanent damage to your station." Admiral Krelthon found his voice. "Impossible. Our security systems are the most advanced in the galaxy." "Your security systems are impressive," the colonel agreed, "but they were designed by species that evolved past their aggressive phases. You have forgotten how to think like predators." The screen changed to show detailed intelligence reports about hegemony military capabilities, fleet dispositions, strategic plans, resource allocations, command structures. Everything the humans needed to plan their next operations. "Humans have never stopped being predators," Colonel Ryu Jae-won explained. "We simply learned to be selective about our prey. Your alliance has oppressed peaceful species for centuries, while convincing yourselves that you are bringing order to the galaxy. This belief is also incorrect." Admiral Krelthon realized he was not just being captured, he was being educated. "What happens now?" "Now you have a choice," the colonel replied. "You can continue to resist human intervention in galactic affairs, in which CAS General Song Min-jae stood before a wall-sized tactical display in the deepest level of Earth's global command center. The display showed 50 different star systems across hegemony space, each marked with status indicators and mission objectives. Around him, staff officers coordinated the largest special operations campaign in human history. "Final mission briefings are complete, sir," reported Colonel Kim Dong-soo, the Psychological Operations Coordinator. "All teams report ready for simultaneous deployment." Song Min-jae nodded, studying the display one last time. Each system represented not just a military target, but a piece of the puzzle that held the hegemony together. When this operation concluded, the galaxy's political structure would be fundamentally changed. "Execute Phase 3, he ordered. Across 50 different worlds, human special forces teams that had been positioned and waiting for weeks began moving toward their objectives. Unlike the earlier demonstrations, these operations were designed to be visible, coordinated, and overwhelming. The galaxy needed to understand that humanity was no longer conducting raids. They were restructuring galactic civilization. Major Yoon Yoonji coordinated intelligence analysis from a command ship positioned just outside hegemony space. Her screens showed real-time updates from every operation, filtered through analysis programs that had been studying alien psychology for months. "Kepler 442b shows green status," she reported. "Local resistance movements have seized the planetary capital with minimal casualties. Hegemony garrison forces are requesting terms for surrender." This was the world where human peacekeepers had first demonstrated their capabilities months earlier. Now, the local population had risen against their hegemony-appointed governors, armed and trained by human advisors who had been preparing this moment for weeks. The uprising was not violent chaos. It was carefully orchestrated political change. Key government buildings had been occupied by rebels who knew exactly what files to secure and which officials to detain. Communication networks that had carried hegemony propaganda now broadcast messages of liberation in dozens of local languages. Nexus 7 shipyard reconstruction is proceeding ahead of schedule, reported another analyst. Human engineering teams have the facility operational again, but now under local management. The shipyard that Master Sergeant Lim Dong-hyun had destroyed was being rebuilt by human specialists who understood both the original technology and how to improve it. But instead of serving hegemony military needs, the new facility would build ships for the liberated worlds that were choosing their own futures. Captain Jang Hyunwoo led a direct action team on the industrial world of Krelnos Prime. Their mission was to secure the planet's manufacturing facilities without disrupting production that fed the local population. The operation demonstrated human special forces at their most sophisticated. Instead of destroying the factories, Jang Hyunwoo's team systematically replaced hegemony management with local workers who had been secretly trained for months. The transition happened so smoothly that most workers did not realize anything had changed until they received notices that their working conditions and pay had been improved. Krelnos Prime reports successful transition, Major Yoon Yoonji announced. Industrial output is increasing under local management. Hegemony administrators have been evacuated safely to neutral territory. Similar reports flowed in from across the galaxy. On agricultural worlds, human teams helped farmers organize cooperative distribution systems that kept more food in local communities. On mining planets, human engineers implemented safety protocols that hegemony managers had ignored for decades. But the most important operations were taking place on the hegemony core worlds, where the Alliance's leadership was discovering that their own populations were not as loyal as they had believed. Colonel Kim Dong-soo's psychological operations had been preparing for this moment for months. Every broadcast Sergeant Bae Jinho had transmitted, every piece of information human intelligence had leaked, every demonstration of hegemony vulnerability had been building toward this day. On Chinthuri Prime, Admiral Veltar's homeworld, crowds gathered in the planetary capital demanding answers about the war with humanity. The broadcast had shown them footage of human prisoners being mistreated, of resources being diverted from civilian needs to support military expansion, of peaceful worlds being forced into the Alliance through economic threats. The Chinthari government found itself facing something they had never encountered, an informed population that was asking uncomfortable questions. When they tried to suppress the demonstrations, human advisors helped organize peaceful resistance that made suppression impossible without obvious brutality. Chinthari Prime shows yellow status, reported one of Song Min-jae's staff officers. Government forces are maintaining order, but public support for continued war is collapsing. Similar scenes played out across the hegemony core worlds. Species that had supported the Alliance because they believed it brought stability and prosperity were learning about the costs that other worlds had paid for that stability. On Nexus Prime, where the Hegemony Council met, Councillor Theclon found himself barricaded in his office as peaceful protesters surrounded the government complex. The protesters were not violent. They simply wanted answers about policies that had been made in their name without their knowledge. "Sir," his aide reported, "we have received a communication from Earth Command. They are offering to mediate negotiations between the government and the protesters." Theclon stared at his aide in disbelief. Earth is offering to mediate? They created this situation. According to the message, sir, Earth's position is that they simply provided information that was already true. They claim the situation was created by policies that were hidden from your own population. The communication from Earth was signed by Ambassador Kang Dae-ho, who had returned to diplomatic duties after the military situation stabilized. His message was polite and professional, offering to facilitate peaceful dialogue between hegemony governments and their populations. But Theclon understood the real message. Humanity was demonstrating that they could destabilize the hegemony's political structure whenever they chose, but they preferred to achieve their objectives through peaceful means. General Song Min-jae watched the tactical display as status indicators across the galaxy shifted from red to yellow to green. Each change represented another world, choosing to break away from hegemony control, another population deciding to govern itself rather than submit to distant authority. "Sir," reported Colonel Kim Dong-soo, "we are receiving surrender requests from 17 different hegemony military commanders. They are requesting terms for their forces and protection for their personnel." This was the most delicate part of the operation. Human forces had demonstrated that they could defeat hegemony military units, but they needed to provide honorable terms for surrender. Alien warriors who felt they had been humiliated might choose to fight to the death rather than accept defeat. "Standard terms," Song Min-jae ordered. "Full honors, repatriation to home worlds, and integration opportunities for any personnel who wish to serve in the new Galactic Security Force." The new Galactic Security Force was humanity's answer to the problem of maintaining order without oppression. Instead of conquest followed by occupation, human forces were organizing voluntary coalitions of worlds that shared common interests and values. It was a radical concept in galactic politics. Military force used to enable self-determination rather than prevent it. Major Yoon Yoon-ji coordinated the intelligence analysis that made this possible. Her teams had spent months studying every species in the hegemony, understanding their cultures, their grievances, and their aspirations. The result was a political restructuring that gave each world what it actually wanted, rather than what the hegemony had decided it should have. Phase 3 objectives achieved across 46 of 50 target systems, she reported. Remaining systems are negotiating terms. No major resistance encountered. The lack of serious resistance was the most telling aspect of the operation. When given the choice between continued hegemony rule and human-supported independence, world after world chose independence. The hegemony's authority had been based on fear and habit, rather than genuine loyalty. But Song Min-jae knew that the real test was still coming. The Hegemony Council had to decide whether to accept the new reality or attempt a desperate last stand that would lead to unnecessary casualties. The answer came in a transmission from Nexus Prime. Counselor Theclon appeared on the communication screen, flanked by representatives from dozens of species. He looked tired and defeated, but also somehow relieved. "General Song," Theclon said, "the Hegemony Council formally requests negotiations for a cessation of hostilities and a peaceful transition to new governmental arrangements." Song Min-jae nodded gravely. "The Earth government accepts your request, Counselor. Ambassador Kang Dae-ho is en route to Nexus Prime with full authority to negotiate on behalf of the human species and our allied worlds." "Allied worlds?" Theclon asked. "The 37 worlds that have chosen independence with human support," Song Min-jae explained. "They have formed a mutual defense pact and requested Earth's assistance in maintaining their security. We,